Together, they operate 374 full-service TV stations that generate billions in annual revenue. I'll start to introduce them. David Smith has poured more time and resources into 3.0 than anyone in the industry. He is executive chairman of Sinclair Broadcast Group. That's a new role he assumed last week so that he could focus primarily on 3.0. Under David's direction, Sinclair was a leader in developing the standard. Through a partnership with Coherent Logics, Sinclair contributed key technology to the standard. Smith is totally committed to making 3.0 happen, and with 173 stations in 81 markets, he has a substantial platform on which to make it happen. Jack Abernethy heads the Fox station group of 28 stations in 17 markets. By one key measure, and that is revenue, it is the biggest group in the US. Most notably, it has duopolies in New York, Los Angeles, Dallas, Philadelphia, Washington, and San Francisco. Jack also oversees the first-run program development at Fox, and as of this summer, is co-president of Fox News Channel. His career includes time at Fox News, the NBC O&Os, and CNBC. Like David Smith, Perry Sook is one of the broadcasting's great consolidators. Starting in 1996 with a single station, Perry has built Nexstar into a powerhouse. When various acquisitions are completed, including the purchase of Media General, Nexstar will own, operate, program, and provide sales and other services to 171 stations and related digital multicast signals, reaching 62 markets across the US. Pat LaPlatney succeeded Paul McTier as CEO of Raycom Media, a privately held mid-sized group with 62 stations in 42 markets. He ascended to that position after having served the company as the executive in charge of media, digital media, for 9 years. Prior to becoming CEO, he was chairman of the Pearl Consortium of major station groups that has emerged as an important backer of 3.0. Our moderator is my friend and business partner, Harry Jessel, the editor of TV News Check. He's perhaps best known for his Jessel at Large column, which appears on Fridays. It champions broadcasters and sometimes reminds them when they go off the rails. Harry?
Thank you, Kathy, and thanks for turning out. This reminds me of Christmas Mass at St. Andrews, where they're all lined up along the walls. It does, I think, say a lot about 3.0 that so many of you have come to hear about it and hear from these guys who are going to make it happen. I've sort of prepped them a little bit, and I've asked them to, on a scale of 10 to 1, to tell me what their enthusiasm is for 3.0, with 10 being the second coming of retrans and 1 being spot revenue in 2017. So we'll start with Jack over there. The growth of spot revenue in 2017, which ain't going to be good. Go ahead, Jack.
I'll just answer it in two ways, really. I think from a technological standpoint, it's a 10, as far as I understand it. And so with the capabilities, it's really terrific. In terms of the business models, I think, we're maybe at a 5, but we're working on it. And so I really think you have to separate the two and not mix them, because the capability of the system, as far as I understand it, is terrific.
I should point out that Fox has been very instrumental in creating the standard. They've been very active. As a matter of fact, Richard Friedel from Fox is the chairman of ATSC. So they have not been slackers on the tech side. Perry, scale 1 to 10?
Yeah, it's 10. We're all in. It's the next technological evolution of our business, and will provide at the base a enhanced viewing experience for our viewers and for our advertisers, and I think it's just a matter now of how fast we can roll things out.
And David, I guess we know where you are.
Is there any number higher than a 10, Harry?
11.
So first, when we talk about the business opportunities, and Perry and I and Pat a few minutes ago said, we're not here to talk about business opportunities because we compete against each other. And the point of that is I would no more tell Perry what I'm going to do than I expect him to tell me what he's going to sell spots for tomorrow, what he's going to pay for TV shows. But the fact of the matter is it is essential for this industry to survive that we have 3.0 in the marketplace as fast as possible. And also, let me just remind everybody, and Fox and NBC get the credit for this. A number of years ago, Fox and NBC started a little business called MCV. For those of you who remember that, raise your hand, I'm curious. Okay, a lot of people remember that. The purpose of that business model was to launch a multi-channel platform across the country. And the broadcasters in this industry joined with NBC and Fox as the leaders and said, let's go. The unfortunate tragedy of that business model was it was hampered by negative technology. The exact same technology that was used in 2001, only a slightly better version of it, I'm sorry, in 2000 when a firm called iBlast was started. Does anybody remember that? Okay. So iBlast was exactly the same business model started by a couple of Hollywood guys. Jack and NBC and Fox essentially did the same thing 10, 12 years later, hampered by the same technology. So believe me when I tell you there will be no shortage of thought and business models that will roll off the back of this thing, but don't expect any one of us to tell you what we're going to do because we compete against each other. But having said that, if you want to go at high altitude and sit down and talk about 30,000-foot stuff that's the art of the possible, we can both do that. All three of us, all four of us do that all day long because the opportunity is unlimited in terms of what we can do.
Pat?
Yeah, so tough to follow that, but I absolutely agree. It's a 10. Speaking for Raycom and I'll take the liberty of speaking for the Pearl Group. I think they're, that piece of the industry is squarely behind it. There is a ton of upside, and as Perry said, we just got to, and everybody else said, we just got to move as quickly as we can to roll it out.
Who is, tell the folks who the Pearl Group is, the group comprises whom?
Yeah, so it's, and I'm going to, forgive me for, I'm going to probably forget somebody, but it's Media General, Tegna, Hearst, Scripps, Cox, Raycom, Graham, and who am I forgetting here? Meredith, thank you. Sorry about that. Paul?
Well, there's certainly doesn't seem to be too much left of the television business that we've included here. BIA came out this week with a report, and they looked at I think the top 18 groups accounted for 80% of the 80% of the industry. All that's left out really is the four broadcast network groups haven't really stepped up to talk about or to endorse fully 3.0, and I think they're coming along. I hope they're coming along. I know Fox is coming along, but it's not the entire industry. This is do you have any sense of where the smaller broadcasters are for which 3.0 would be a significant investment? They're not, I mean, they don't have the resources you people do. I mean, is the smaller groups, the below 30, are they in? Do you know? What's your sense?
My sense is yes. I mean, I know I haven't made it an exhaustive effort to talk to everybody, but those that I've spoken with are extremely excited about the prospect of 3.0.
Would you all agree? I mean, David?
I think it's a lot simpler than that. The fact of the matter is you don't have any choice. Because if you want to compete in today's world, which is a totally 100% mobile world, mobile platforms, mobile advertising, you have no choice but to be in this business. Otherwise, you should go home. Because the television set hanging on the wall at your house is not irrelevant yet, but it's becoming less relevant as we go forward. There was a piece out the other day in one of the rags that said 70+% of all advertising in the future will be mobile. We're not in that business, folks. If we're not in that business, we have no business. If we're in that business, we're the same as everybody else. Targeted ads, specific data as to who's watching, where, under what circumstances, geo-targeting, all those things that everybody else does. If we want to compete, you have to be in that business. If you don't want to compete, you should close your door and go home. Somebody doesn't want to hear me?
Jack?
Yeah, well, you invited me on this panel as the, I forget what your words were, the uninformed cynic or something? Was that why I was?
I think it was informed.
I think stations are coming around, and people are coming around as progress is made. But for the last couple of years, I was joking earlier that anybody who spoke out against this was sort of like a Trump voter, fearful of speaking up to an exit poller for fear of looking stupid and backward. But I think there is some resistance still. But I think it will come around as plans become more firm the technology gets clearer, and the choices are clearer. But there still is a skepticism about this that I have, and I think it's waning.
Well, that's good to hear. 3.0 does a lot of different things, Perry. What excites you the most about it? I think David's on the record as saying the mobile capability. What application excites you most about it?
Well, as I said earlier, I think the first thing is the enhanced viewership experience for the people that are our core customers already, our viewers and our advertisers. I don't think we want to be in a position where the NFL says, why do my games look so much better on ESPN than they do on the Fox affiliates, because they didn't make the transition when everybody else did. But I think, as David said, I think just the pure fact of the option value. You know, I was part of a working group at the NAB a few years ago, and Pat was as well, where we explored the business opportunities for 3.0. And, you know, we started with 50 ideas and distilled it down to about a dozen things that we think could be applicable. And that list today is now out of date. But I mean, who knows if there is a killer app or if it is, a series of additional capabilities. The fact that the system is IP based, I mean, gives you tremendous potential that we don't have today. So I think it's just the pure fact of the option value that it gives you to explore all of these different business opportunities that, as David said, we can't do today.
So let me just frame for you. Perry and I, being public companies, spend a lot of time in front of the investment community trying to explain to them the magic of what 3.0 is. And believe me, when you start talking about it, it goes like this. And one of the things I literally did the last day or so was to try and think about how do you explain something that in our world isn't necessarily that complicated, but in the lay world is terribly complicated in terms of understanding what a pipe is and how many megabits and what's a megabit good for and one thing and another. So I reduced this down for self-serving purposes to explain in plain English to people what this really is all about. So let me try it on everybody here. In the real estate world, and I think most people understand real estate concepts because they're not complex. If you look at the original, here's a little kind of a history lesson. If you look at the history of us transitioning from analog to digital, we were given a 19.3 megabit pipe. On day one, if you did high definition, it took 19.3 megabits as a practical matter to do your business. Compression came along, it got a little bit better, then it was 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, then all of a sudden, when you could do something at 10 or 12 megabits, you had this free piece of real estate. And then what came out of that? People knocked on our doors and said, can you give me a channel inside your pipe? And of course, they're called D2s today, D2s, D3s, D4s, D5s, right? And all those little businesses that many of us started years ago in terms of renting our real estate, some of them went out of business, some of them now make a little bit of money, some of them make a lot of money. When you contrast the 1.0 platform of today versus the 3.0 platform of tomorrow, we essentially go from a 19 megabit pipe to roughly a 25 megabit pipe, a portable pipe, unlike the 1.0 pipe, number one. Number two, in the world of compression today, you can do what you do today, depending on whether you're doing 720, 1080, whatever, between 2 and 5 megabits. That leaves 20 megabits of free real estate to develop. And you can do anything you want in that business. They got nothing, 1 megabit's got nothing to do with the next megabit. It literally is 20 separate discrete acres of real estate that's to be developed. It's that simple. It isn't any more complicated than that. Except within each one of those pieces of real estate, you may want to do a 20-story office building, you may want to do a 1-story office building. Depends on what you want to do. That's the optionality that we all have. So when you think about it just in a real estate context. How are you going to develop that 20 acres of real estate going forward? And from a Wall Street's perspective and from a selfish perspective, I say to the Wall Street, do you think I can't use that real estate to create 3, 4, 5% growth across my entire platform? The answer to that is a blind person can do that. So we're trying to sell the whole notion to Wall Street. We have to do this because I want that 20 acres of real estate to develop tomorrow. And believe me when I tell you, there are people knocking on doors now who want that real estate. It's just about what's the deal and when will it be built.
Be specific, David. I mean, let me just, with David here. you've described the platform, great analogy, but what business is going to give us the 4 or 5% a year?
Well, as I said, I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do, but if you want to talk about, there's 1,000 different businesses. I'll give you a simple one. And most of you have heard me say this in the past. And I use it not because it's because I have specific intent to do this, because I honestly don't believe in any way this is the highest and best use of the platform. But we all know who SiriusXM is, right? The last time I looked, it was a $20 billion market cap business. And it's a monopoly. Nice business to have. I'd like to have one of those someday. It's a $20 billion monopoly that has no competition. If I wanted to use a few megabits of my pipe to be in that business, and all of us got together, let's say that Perry and I and Jack and 4 or 5 other folks got together and said, we're going to create a national platform. We can do 100 channels of that business tomorrow with no effort. And be in competition with an absolute monopoly. Now again, I'm not here to tell you I would do that because I don't necessarily believe that's the highest and best use of the platform. Jack's and Fox's and NBC's business model was to roll out 30, 40, 50, 80 channels of television on a completely mobile basis. Does that exist today? Yeah, if you got a bit plan. No bits involved in this. So there's 1,000 things like that you can do. That's just one of them.
Pat, what do you think? What do you like about it?
So there's, so I'll rather than retread, I'll talk about a few other things you could do. The standard enables advanced advertising, which I think is a critical, as a business, we need to move in that direction. Everybody's getting data these days. The cable guys have data, the satellite guys have data. Local broadcast, not so much. So it's the standard will help enable a move towards targeted advertising, which is really, really important. There's also the whole sort of concept of wholesaling data. That's getting data into automobiles. There really is an unlimited number of options as we go forward. And frankly, as I said last year, I still believe there's a lot of money there.
Jack, do you have any ideas? I mean, you're considering this anyway. What entices you?
Well, look, I'm a buyer, not a seller. So I'm looking at this from a buying standpoint. And I sort of look at a lot of these claims. There was a study that came out by Pearl that said there were $20 billion out there. And I'm very suspicious of how big this could be. But as I look at it, even in the most conservative of plans, it makes sense. It just makes sense to have a bigger pipe that we can deliver our product to, even with existing business. It makes sense. In terms of some of the bigger plans, they're worth looking into. But I'm still a little skeptical about the size.
Size of the business overall.
Size of the ability.
Well, the $20 billion number, I've heard that, and Sam used it earlier. That seems incredible. BIA says, total spot revenue for the business is $20 billion. You're talking about doubling the size of the business.
Harry, what you have to get your head around.
That was a forecast, Harry. I think we all are a little bit suspicious of forecasts these days.
See,
We're not going to get into politics, are we?
I have a different, my view, when I see a forecast like that, then I challenge all the assumptions.
You know what?
And I'm not, some people look and say, if it's his 10th as good, I'm in, right? I tend to say, let's go through all the rest of the assumptions. I'm getting hustled here.
I think that's how reporters look at those kind of numbers too.
So let me tell you why it's not a hustle. The $20 billion is based on the market value of the bits across the United States under the assumption that broadcasters have gotten together and pooled their bits. And if you think that's an impossible task, it's already happened twice. It happened in the year 2000 under iBlast, when people freely gave 7 megabits of their type to that business enterprise. Never got off the ground. It happened with MCV, again, which was Fox and NBC. A well-intentioned, and Pearl, a well-intentioned business model. The technology failed them. The business never got launched in the real world. But the economics of that business, and I know Jack's seen it, is the real deal. But again, nobody here is smart enough to tell you, well, that's the most perfect business model. But the point is that entrepreneurs like Fox and NBC and Pearl said, we're going to go do this. If you just think about just one aspect of our business and you took the 20 acres and you set it aside and said, I'm never going to use it, I would tell you that the value proposition in just data alone, as Pat alluded to, the notion of targeted advertising is worth, anybody here sell spots? What's a targeted ad worth? 2x, 3x, 4x. That's what it's worth. IP addresses are the ultimate holy grail for this industry, just like it is for the internet, just like it is for Facebook. They know who you are, where you are, and what you're doing. Broadcasters have no clue what goes on in the real world. We have no legitimate, honest-to-God audience measurement data whatsoever. Does anybody here believe Nielsen's ratings? Does anybody here believe Rentrax? On an absolute basis, do you believe it? If you do, raise your hand. I'd love to know, because nobody believes it. Okay.
Afraid to raise
So-
your
Can I
hand.
just jump?
Are you afraid to raise your hand? Give me 2 seconds, Jack. So the point of that is, when IP-based platform is launched, every device in the marketplace, I now know who it is and where it is. I can now sell a specific ad to that. Jack can sell, anybody can sell to that. That is worth more. If you do nothing more than that alone, and you get 2x, what's that worth in terms of Wall Street's view of growth? If I did nothing else, I'm happy doing that.
Can I just jump in? In your question about all the opportunities that we can take advantage with all the financial upside, the honest with you, I think coming up with a measuring system is the most important thing for this industry. And I've always been frustrated by the lack of effort to kind of come together and do that. That to me is dwarfs. If we could create a measuring system that's actually accurate,
All right,
then that would be more valuable, in my view,
I agree.
than all the stuff you're talking about.
You could take the 20 acres and set it off to the side. So look, those of you who know us as Sinclair, we tend to be a little bit pushing a little bit forward. So let me tell you, if you read the press release that came out a week or so ago, Mark Aiken et al. Are going to develop, much in the same way they did the foundational aspects of 3.0, are going to develop the next data gathering platform in this industry, because somebody has to do it. So we're going to do it. In conjunction with anybody who wants to participate in the process, feel free. We're the biggest broadcaster. Perry and us are the biggest broadcaster. Jackson, Pat are the biggest broadcasters. We have a vested interest in knowing exactly what's going on, minute by minute, day by day, period. We're going to develop it, and when we're done, we're going to hand it to the industry just like we did 3.0 and say, here it is. We think this is in the best interest. If you want to participate in the process, please contact Mark et al., because we've already started the process.
Well, let's talk about cost. We weren't able to pin down the revenue exactly. We just know it's just going to be bigger. But
Bigger's
Perry,
better.
Perry, you own 170 stations. What's the cost of upgrading for 3.0 to upgrade all those stations? It must be enormous.
Not as much as you would think. I mean, to get into the game, it's probably $250,000 or to $500,000 per call letter just to make the transition and get in the game. Now, if you want to get into the SFM business and things like that, it's going to be more, but I don't think that has to be done on day one. I think it's a crawl, walk, run kind of a build. So to put it in perspective, for our entire group, it would be less than 1 year's run rate CapEx. The analog to digital transition was about 5 years worth of CapEx and the unfunded federal mandate that was that conversion.
Pat, is that true? Can you get away with just putting in the new exciter and the transmitter? Don't you have to build the signal frequency network in order to do the mobile that David talks about? You can't do mobile unless you have the...
There's certain things you can do with just, the new exciter, and then there's more you can do if you, put in SFN. So, if you put in the new exciter, you get this great spectral efficiency, right? So you can add channels and capabilities. You'll have a better looking picture, better audio, better video. So there's absolutely value there. And ultimately, if you want to have an SFN network, it's going to open up more possibilities. But explain what it is. So I should let the engineer do that. It's a single frequency network. It basically is sort of a repeater system. And Dave, if you want to expound on that, That's really,
Look, the way you should think about this is, think of the single frequency network as nothing, not nothing more, but initially the primary purpose of it is to create a quality of service that replicates what the phone companies do. Because the phone companies, as scary as this may be, are the ultimate competition. And I would tell you something, one of our board members, whose name is Martin Leader, who was our former FCC attorney, 30 years ago told me, understand who your competition is and who your enemy is. It isn't the other broadcasters, it's the phone companies. He said, if you don't see what's coming, you're going to get rolled. And the tragedy is, we got rolled 15 years ago. And we're not going to get rolled again because we're going to do this because it's in our interest. If we can't offer a quality of service that in the long term is as good as theirs, then we have an inferior product. Right now, the typical broadcast platform's got a radius of 35, 40, 50 miles, depending on how tall your tower is and one thing and another. So, as Pat said, you don't need to do it today, but if you want to be in other businesses and you want to further develop that 20 acres of real estate, there is a legitimate business reason to do that. But it is not essential on day one to do that. What's essential on day one is when 3.0 rolls out, that we have data gathering capability, because I want to be able to take the data that comes off the device, give it to an independent third party, have them quantify it, stamp, and do all the things necessary to say, yes, it's real, because it's not disputable anymore, because it's coming from a individual device. I know where it is and who it is and yada yada. That's the most important thing. Once we have that, the world changes for us.
So how much is it going to cost?
Immaterial.
Pardon?
It's immaterial. It's not
Immaterial,
relevant.
yes.
Not relevant.
Building several, we're talking about several?
In the typical marketplace, you might do 4 to 6 SFM platforms. But again, you don't have to do that today. You can do that later on. The whole purpose of doing that business model is to create a nationwide broadcast market exchange where people have committed bits on a total basis into a pool. So that people in Columbus, Ohio can use the bits differently than the person in Dayton, Ohio, or the person in San Antonio, Texas, or Seattle, Washington, or wherever it happens to be. Think of that as a completely separate, much larger scale business model that Akamai might use or Amazon might use because they got to fill out that last mile because the internet's failed on them or whatever it happens to be. Don't even worry about that now. Just focus on get 3.0 out. Let's cover our 40-mile radius and get data that we know is legitimate. For anybody here who sells, and there's a lot of folks here who sell, can you imagine walking into an advertiser and saying, I can actually tell you there's 42,000 women, blonde hair, blue eyes, 6 foot tall, that live in this zip code, and you know what they pay for that? A whole lot more than they pay today. A whole lot damn more. That alone is worth multiple growth points.
Perry, do you have the same trouble as David does selling this to Wall Street?
I think that explaining it to Wall Street,
explaining it.
I think people get the fact you make an investment, there's multiple opportunities for return, and it enhances your base business. So I don't think that the resistance out there is maybe what you think. I think that there are many small broadcasters represented on the NAB board, and Jack and I sit on that board. And I mean, I've not heard a single objection from those customers to rolling this out. I think making it voluntary, let's get on with it, and you'll either do it or you'll be left behind. But if the market makes that decision, then that's just the way of the world.
So just to amplify that, so we've proffered in a serious sense to a number of people over the years that kind of really small market folks who look at this and say, I don't have that kind of money to go invest. So here's the business answer to that. If you don't have the money to invest, I got a deal for you, and here's the deal. I'll build your business model for you. I'll build your platform. I'll do the transition for you. I'll write the check for that. What I want for that is I want your 20 megabits. And once I get a 10 to 1 or 1,000 to 1 return on that, you're my partner. Nothing tricky. If you can't do it, I'll do it for you. So if there's any small broadcasters out there who can get their head around that idea, you got my phone number.
I mean, you're actually taking this idea out to other broadcasters?
We've talked about it over the years, a number of folks who say, I don't have the money for that. I said, that's okay.
Jack, how much of your skepticism is based on the cost of this thing? Is that a factor?
None.
What is it then? Elaborate a little bit on what's holding you back. What's the network think? I mean, all along, the missing piece here has been the network. CBS has been public with, saying, well, what's 3.0 going to do that we can't do on OTT? They're sort of all in on access, all access. They like the broadband. They get cash money for it. What's the network's problem?
You're gonna have to ask them. I mean, I don't.
I'm talking about Fox.
What's that?
What's
I mean,
Fox's
to
problem?
me, I think part of it was, I was joking before, is that people are afraid to speak up because they'll be made, you'll make them look stupid in your column, in the comments. Some of you are probably all here.
Who are these commenters, by the way? Are there any in the room?
I can only speak for us, and as far as I know, there's no network division that owns sticks. I mean, we have a station group, and we're in the station business, and we look at it the way every other station group does, and we approach it the way every other station group does. Our network, Richard Friedel, who's helped develop the technology, works for the network. So I think I often sense a anti-network bias within the station groups that sort of fuels some kind of suspicion. I don't think there's anything, you have to ask CBS.
Well, as long as they're out there, let's say, not endorsing it, just being, and I think, I've heard that they're being actively opposing it in some quarters in Washington, but let's just say they're ignoring it. Doesn't that hurt you on Wall Street, David and Perry? If the four biggest companies in
No,
the
market,
industry?
okay, well, let's let the market decide. Okay, the market embraces this technology. Do you want to be the only one without it? I'm not particularly worried about, there was some foot dragging in the analog to digital conversion by certain groups, but ultimately everybody got there because they had to get there. I think this is the same way. And if it's voluntary, there'll be first movers. Maybe there'll be a first mover advantage, and I think others will quickly determine that for all the reasons we've said so far, that this is a business they've got to be in.
Look, the thing to appreciate about the broadcast business today, and I think I can make a general statement here that says, we're not a growth business, folks, in case you haven't noticed. If you want to be a growth business and you want to get multiples associated with growth businesses, you got to do something different than what we're doing. 3.0 absolutely will provide that optionality to be a growth business and be looked upon differently, fundamentally, by Wall Street, if you want to be in a growth business. Period, end of discussion. You got to make that decision. I don't think there is a network or the smallest broadcaster in the world who doesn't say, I'm here to make more money. And oh, by the way, that's not inconsistent with serving the public interest, because one of the public interest aspects of this is huge in terms of more news channels if you want to be in the news business, news to specific neighborhoods, all kinds of things to take over basically the newspaper industry that's going to go away. Lots of opportunity here to do things that are public interest oriented as a function of 3.0. Emergency information, all kinds of things. It's just huge.
Speaking of the networks, I should point out that NBC and Fox were very active and very supportive of the mobile DTV effort several years ago, which David said failed because the technology wasn't up to snuff. But they were in the game at that point. Tough question. If we spend all this money, if the broadcasters spend all this money to improve the OTA coverage, people start cutting the cord, aren't you cutting your retrans revenue off? I mean, every person who says, wow, this is great, I can get it on my rabbit ear, suddenly I can watch TV on my rabbit.
Why do you think that the two are linked and related?
I'm sorry?
Why do you think that you preface that as almost a affirmative statement? You're speculating that would happen,
that
right?
that people would, because I think it'd be a hell of a, just speaking as a consumer, if suddenly I pull the TV out of the box and I set it up, I put rabbit ears, and I'm getting 30 channels in New York, why am I paying for cable?
You can
and
do
I'm
that
not
today.
watching that much cable
You can
anyway.
I live in Dallas, Texas, and we got, I think there are 68 channels that you could watch if you rescanned your TV. But so I don't know that I agree with your premise. And if it were so, then why didn't it happen in the analog to digital transition? Because wasn't that a better picture?
It was a better picture, but the coverage was lousy. a lot of people couldn't get, a lot of people were more dependent on cable because the signal was so poor. I mean, they were disenfranchised. Here, David is telling me I can get it anywhere.
That's evolved in the last 15 years. The 1.0 receivers today aren't what they were 15 years ago. They're materially better, but on a relative basis, they're not worth a damn compared to 3.0. But on a relative basis, they're dramatically better. And as Perry points out, the world hasn't changed as a function of that.
So this new technology, you're saying, will not cause a rise in OTA viewership?
So let me give you my kind of broad view of that. It's going to do what it does. The market's going to do whatever it does. But in the broader picture, my 20 acres of real estate, I'm here to suggest to you, is worth more than what my network relationship is, or my independent relationship is.
Well, Jack, are you worried about loss of retrans?
I have a little bit of a different take. First of all, like Perry said, the fact that we have a new technology doesn't necessarily change the dynamic. Right now, you can still get a superior signal over the air. Our take on it is a little different in that we are absolutely committed to a dual revenue stream business that's broadly distributed. And that's the only way we're going to keep the NFL. That's the only way we're going to get the best product that's going to make broadcasting a premier platform. Anything that endangers that is something that we're going to have to deal with very seriously. Aereo, if you remember from a few years ago, was a way of endangering. So, the technology, the ability to use the technology doesn't mean you're going to necessarily go down one road or the other. It just gives you optionality. But we are absolutely concerned about giving away our product for free and undermining our business model. Let's look at print and everything else. You got to be very careful because remember, for years everybody said, "Oh no, we'll give it away on the web," and we're reaching younger viewers and we're promoting our service, and now those businesses are nearly gone. So we have to be very careful about protecting a dual revenue stream, but ATSC 3.0 doesn't have anything, it may even create opportunities.
Oh, so you're not concerned that, this thing, you roll this out with the SFN, better coverage, you don't think that will contribute to loss of your revenue?
It could, but the technology itself just gives us optionality. Doesn't mean it doesn't tell us how we have to use it.
Yeah, Harry, I don't know that they're necessarily linked. They might be linked, but I don't think people make the decision to cut the cord because they can get a better picture over the air. They do it for other reasons. And on the Upper West Side, my bill to Time Warner just for broadband or broadband plus video is just an incremental increase. And so there are a lot of reasons people buy the bundle. You get into the whole bundle discussion, the skinny bundle, but I don't think you put ATSC as a cause for people to cut the cord. Pat? It may be related, but I think you're mixing apples and oranges.
Yeah, I would concur. I mean, could there be some leakage? Yeah, and in the study we did last year, once we got through it, we looked and said, maybe there's some leakage. And by the way, the world has gotten a hell of a lot more complex since last year. I mean, there's a new over-the-top distributor popping up every day. So there's a lot of reasons why people cut the cord. There's a lot of reasons why people who are cord nevers might decide, okay, well, for $35, I'll take that deal. It's a complex world. But the fact that the technology is there and enables other revenue streams. The thought was that the growth in advanced advertising would more than offset whatever leakage there was.
So when you think about it, Jack refers to it today as a dual revenue stream. We have multiple revenue streams. We started this little thing called Comet, which is a 24-hour partnership between us and MGM. We make a lot of money doing that, and I use this much of my pipe to do that. So you could argue I now have 3 revenue streams. I want 100 or 50 or have as many as I can get.
Well, I understand your point that there's whatever loss you may suffer would be offset in
Unquestionably.
Okay, I get that, but I guess nobody up here is really concerned that OTA increase would have any material impact on their retrans business or revenue side.
I think it's
I
fair.
am.
Oh, Jack, except for Jack. Okay. Well,
Harry, just turn it around because, you know, in my universe of portfolio, approximately 14% of our audience does not consume us via a pay service. That's on the primary set. When you go to the set in the workshop, the set in the kids' bedroom, that number becomes 2 or 3 times that. What if that were a better viewing experience? Are there ancillary benefits to that? So I think you're trying to make a multivariable equation, a binary kind of if-then statement, and I'm not sure that the two are linked. That could be a byproduct, but if I now have, with these 4 companies, we have 90% of the U.S. unduplicated reach, and if we set aside 2 megabits per market and made that available for lease, and that was worth more than my ad stream, you know, I think you have to look at the totality of the options that it gives you versus the options you have today, and it may be at some point in the future our assets are more valuable selling bits than selling video. I don't know, but I mean, how will you know until you try?
So Harry, let me translate that for you. Stop the bias.
what is that?
Stop the bias. Just kidding, Harry. Just kidding.
I was surprised, you know, you put the FCC, your application into the FCC last April or May, and I was surprised to see that you did not ask for a mandate, a tuner mandate, as the industry did back in the DTV days, where every set would have to have a 3.0 tuner in it. And I assume that you did that to get the support of the consumer electronics industry, but is that really a good idea, David, not to have a tuner mandate?
Look, I think we live in a market-driven world today, and I think we're sophisticated enough as marketers and delivery guys to figure out how to get the consumer to want our product. I don't think it's that complicated. So by way of example, let me suggest to you that if I took a device and I had my anchor at my television station and my weatherman and my sports person or whatever it happens to be, hold a device up and say, whether it's an LG device or a Joe Blow's device, I don't care. Say, if you like to have me with you everywhere you go for the rest of your life and know exactly what's going on in your neighborhood, your schools, et cetera, go get this device.
Well, I might go into Best Buy or even my supermarkets. They sell TV sets and buy an off-brand that has no tuner in it. And so,
What I'm suggesting to you is that the market will demand the availability of local television stations everywhere all the time. And we create that demand. We will do that. Now, having said that, look, if I'm opposed to the notion that we should do things on a mandatory basis, if the government for some reason woke up one day and said, you know what, we think it's a national security issue that every television station, every phone, every car in the United States, by virtue of public television's ability to blanket the entire country, said we think manufacturers should have these things in their devices, that's their business.
well, it's a hell of an argument. Why don't we make it, Pat? Or why don't the broadcasters make it? There's Gordon Smith over there. He's ready to
We're free
go.
market. We're free market guys.
So in Korea, you know, they're preparing for the 2018 Olympics, and the Korean manufacturers are building dual tuner sets right now, and so, yeah, that certainly can be replicated in this country. I don't see any reason why we necessarily need the mandate.
I'm sorry, you said in Korea they do not?
They're building sets with dual tuner, you know, so 1.0 and 3.0. That's, you know, we could easily replicate that here. And again, it's as David said, I mean, you know, we're good marketers. We can, you know, we don't necessarily need a mandate. However, you know, if for, you know, public safety concern reasons, there's some interesting functionality in 3.0. It can wake up devices and other such that, you know, there's an argument there.
Well, as a political matter, that would be opposed, I suppose, by consumer electronics folk, right? Yes.
But we're not supporting it. If the government
Well,
says
I'm
for
just
some
saying,
reason,
if you tried, it's a pretty good argument.
yeah, but it's not our argument. It's the government's argument. It's the government's argument. If the government wants to make that argument, let
Well,
feel free to go
sometimes
do
the
that.
government has to be nudged into what to think.
We
That's
don't
why
do
we have
that.
lobbyists.
That's not our business. We're in the business of selling spots and doing news and delivering people's content. That's what we do.
I wanted to back you up on something. You said the SFN, the cost immaterial. Could you put some numbers to that, or any of you put some numbers to how much
If-
it would
if-
actually
if-
cost?
if-
Would
if a-
millions of
if a
dollars,
single-
tens
if
of
a-
millions?
If a single tower, SFN, through which every broadcaster in the marketplace could go, so just envision a small building, tower, small tower, maybe it's on top of a hill, maybe it's a American Tower or somebody, common antenna, single transmission line, 8 broadcasters in the bottom of it. Bingo, everybody's in the SFN business. What's that cost? $500,000. $750,000 if you want to get crazy and you want fancy grass and painted walls and whatever, right?
Well, this presumes that all the broadcasters will collectively do these things, right?
Well, I would say, why would you want to go build, why would you go spend $500,000 when you could do it one time and just split the cost? Or you can rent. Let somebody else build it and you can rent.
Well, Pearl has
That's-
been shows that the broadcasters can sit around the table, but they haven't really, I guess,
Let me suggest something
keep-
to you about sitting around the table. I'm not a big believer in sitting around the table. I'm a big believer in getting stuff done. And what
Well,
you're
that
going to find here is that these guys here, this is what we do. We do stuff.
well, that was my question. I mean, it's one thing to sit around the table, but broadcasters getting together, cooperate in each market, build common towers, common
So
SFN,
the 4 of us represent, how many television stations?
400.
Okay, 400, throw in Gray, there's another, a couple other guys, and all of a sudden, we got 2/3 of the broadcasters in the United States, and there's 5 of us sitting at the table.
Let's make a deal right now. Let's do it.
Well, how do you know we're not doing that?
Okay, this is a great opportunity. If you have any questions about 3.0 or where it's going, Mr. Kurz.
So David, and this, anyone can address this question. You made a couple of interesting.
Why'd you mention me then? If anything? Okay.
You mentioned that mobile is very important to our business. This is what people are watching. They want to watch TV where they go. You also mentioned in another part that you've been advised by a 30-year associate, board member, former attorney, that the telephone companies were really your competition. And so the question is, to implement this mobile reception the broadcasters are going to do, folks are going to have access to that signal. Most of us are walking around with cell phones. Are you confident we're going to be able to get receiver chips in those cell phones?
I think the passage of time will dictate the answer to that. I think the answer is yes, but I think the phone companies will eventually be dragged kicking and screaming to that business reality because the market's going to demand it. And it may be that there are other manufacturers who simply say, here's my device, and maybe the country evolves like the rest of the world has in terms of, I'll pick my carrier, I'll get my own device. We'll have to wait and see, but again, I think we're marketers first, and you have to give us some credit for saying, we're going to make this happen, we're going to push this into the marketplace, and it may start with pads, it may start with any number of devices, but once it starts, I philosophically believe that the notion of over-the-air, local newscast, high school this, something else that, will be addictive, and people say, I have to have it. Much in the same way, landlines in people's homes have kind of gone away because everybody says, I have to have a cell phone. Well, everybody loves local news. Everybody watches local news because they want to know what's going on in the community. All news is local. Nobody really gives a damn about what's going on in Afghanistan or South Africa. It's what's going on in my neighborhood. And nobody does that other than us. That's our key to the kingdom.
Dennis Wharton here. Dennis, tell us where the FM chip is in the telephone. They've been fighting this battle for years, and as far as I know, I have a Samsung telephone, and it has an FM chip in it. I still can't receive it because they haven't authorized it. Where does that stand?
Well, it's on T-Mobile, it's on AT&T, it's on Verizon, it's on Sprint. We're waiting for Apple to do a
So-
deal.
Do they have the chips, or they've authorized? They've authorized.
Certain of the devices, but those are the 4 carriers that have bought in, and we need Apple to be the last domino to fall.
All right, so maybe a marketplace. It took years, but maybe the marketplace works. That they'll see the advantage.
I don't think you can juxtapose FM and AM radio against television and suggest that there's any equality there in terms of the market demand. I just don't buy that. So I understand why they have their frictional issues with the phone companies.
Question back here, sir.
Yeah, I'd like to thank David for the American Tower plug, and I'm here to take pre-orders on SFN.
Pete, just make sure I get my scrape on the deal. Okay. Well, unless you're a fool, unless you want to throw your money away. All things being equal in terms of the technology and the delivery ability, we win that battle all day long. It's not even negotiable. It's just ridiculous how. If you look at what the cost of bits are today versus landline bits versus mobile bits versus what our bits are, we can price our bits against the market and make an absolute fortune. No effort whatsoever. In fact, if you go back and look at the report, Mark, I'm going to ask you, the report that we did a few years ago, we hired the economist to tell us what our bits are worth against all these other deliverers of bits. I forget the name of the firm, but they're the ones that kind of came out, and I think it's been substantiated by other analysts in the marketplace. It's kind of where the $20 billion comes from. It's about what's the value of a bit today. The market value of a bit is defined, isn't it? You all pay it every day, whether you pay it by virtue of a hard line into your house, by virtue of what you pay the phone company, whatever it happens to be. Bit prices are defined. The market is defined. We can compete in that marketplace with no effort whatsoever and make an absolute fortune. If we did nothing other than to be the last mile for an Amazon or Akamai, whoever it happens to be, there's serious, serious money to be made. So while a 2-income stream is nice, as I said, I want 100 income streams. All you need to do is build the platform, and they will come.
Back here?
All right, this is the point where your commenters shout this guy down.
Listen,
Well, we got David here for that.
You hit on the transition process, and there's no question it is hard. And it's not like analog to digital because we're not getting an extra frequency to kind of park until everybody's ready. So it will require cooperation, it will require innovation, and again, I think the market will ultimately drive it. And 5 years, okay, if it takes 5 years, the transition from black and white to color, end to end, took 21 years. Okay, this isn't going to take 21 years. Is it going to take a few? That was mandated by the government. This is voluntary. Well, correct, but I do think that the market moves faster than the government, right? And that's why we haven't asked for any kind of a mandate. Because what would you mandate? And what if you mandate the wrong receiver standard or something like that? This is moving quickly. The transition piece of it is nuanced. It's hard. There's the whole backward compatibility, problem. I think that broadcasters are willing to bear their own freight and maybe do it during the course of the repack. The FCC has said if it costs $100 for that 1.0 equipment and you want to buy a 3.0 equipment with your repack money for the same $100, if it costs more than that, you bear the difference. But we have a real opportunity to get moving on this, and there isn't a quick, easy, flip the switch solution, but we've been talking about this for a long time and figuring out the piece of it. The NAB has been leading down the road of, okay, we have to deal with all of these different moving parts during the transition. It is hard, but I think that the industry, if they put their willpower behind, will figure out a way to get it done.
So let me just kind of ask the last question as it relates to that line of thought. What choice do you have? Is the ultimate question you have to answer for yourself.
what's the opportunity cost of not doing it?
Yeah.
Well,
You have no choice.
I guess you could also say, if I'm reading you right, David, is that even if you don't sell one TV set with a tuner in it, you still have the data casting business, right?
Totally. Absolutely correct. As I say, there's lots of different business models here.
Glenn?
If so much of the value of this is that it is an IP-based system, and you'll have an IP back channel to allow you to really measure viewing. But compared to the cable operators or satellite operators or phone companies, you're not actually selling or leasing that receiver to the consumer. Do you see any problems getting access to that data from whoever's providing the broadband access to that viewer?
So
how do you see that work?
there is no broadband access here. We're the broadband.
I'm talking about being able to get the measurement.
Okay, so the data comes back via Wi-Fi, comes back via cell phone channel, just like it does today. How does it come back today when you think about how's your pad deliver data back? When all the apps you download on your pad or your phone, when you download that app and you sign that 42-page contract, you know what you've agreed to? You've agreed to.
I understand that, but you're talking
We're
about
no-
launching a business that is competing maybe against things that Verizon Wireless already does on that phone. So that's what I'm just seeing, people asked about retrans before. It seems to me that working in conjunction with a broadband provider to a home probably makes more sense for the business, some of the business models you guys are talking about.
Well, I think how do you get access to the data? You can get it through retrans negotiation. That's already a part of the retrans negotiation with some MVPDs today, is we want access to your set-top box data. And so, it will become a part, and if you want our content, the premium content, then I think that will be a negotiation.
I don't think getting the data back is going to be any issue. I have no concern about that whatsoever. What I'm concerned about is somebody has to instruct the device to do the following. So if you happen to be watching somebody's television channel, once that channel's been watched or simultaneously live if possible, depending on what the connectivity is between that device and the channel that comes out of that, whether it's Wi-Fi, a phone, or whatever, somebody has to tell that device what to do. No different than the app you download today for whatever it happens to be. They've effectively taken control of your device and whatever they choose to, and they tell you exactly what they're going to do. We're not going to do anything any different. I'm going to instruct that device to send stuff to me. I don't need to go in and probe, but I only want it to come out. Whereas all the other apps you download, they're coming in to probe. I just want to know what you're watching so you can send it to me. Big difference between what we're going to ask and what all the other folks ask.
Hey, this has been a great discussion, but we have to wrap it up. Join me in giving these guys a round of applause.
Okay, Bill, thank you.